I have been with my fiancé for 2 years. We are both 37 years old. We're getting married soon. I've only met her family a couple of times. My daughter, Judy, 16 years old, has never met them till very recently, where they hosted dinner to celebrate 4th of July, and that's when they met her for the first time. Judy has a visible burn scar on her forehead. It was due to an accident she was in when she was 9. She used to be incredibly insecure about it, to the point where I was forced to homeschool her, and it was hard trying to deal with and navigate through this rough time. Now she's doing a lot better, though some comments can really cause her to become stressed out and anxious. My fiancé knows all that and respects it. Before we went to her parents' house, I asked her to tell them about Judy and her struggle, and get to try and not say anything negative about it or possibly mention it. She said she would guarantee no one will say anything. We got to the event and they talked to Judy, and she slowly warmed up to them. Everything was going well till it was dinner time. My FMIL looked at Judy while she was eating and pointed at her scar, basically asking questions about it, which made Judy lose her appetite and start to get uncomfortable. I kept sending my fiancé and her mom signs to knock it off, but to no avail. Finally, FMIL then brought up the wedding and asked my fiancé if it'd be possible to Photoshop the scar out of any wedding photos that will have Judy in them, just in case they distract viewers. I was dumbfounded. Fiancé said nothing, just stared casually while nodding. I looked at Judy and it was clear this got to her. I leaned closer and asked if she was feeling uncomfortable and that we could leave if the answer was yes. She took her time, then nodded and said, "Yes, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now." I got up and told her to get ready cause we were leaving. My fiancé, her mom and the family started insisting we finish dinner and stay, but I refused. I took Judy and got in the car and left before even talking to my fiancé. Obviously, she was pissed. She called and was angry, talking about how I disrespected her parents by taking Judy and leaving in the middle of dinner and not even saying goodbye. I told her that Judy was feeling uncomfortable with Mills' comments and questions. She said Judy overreacted and is in need to go back to therapy if a simply mention of her scar caused her to react that way. I got tired of arguing and asked her to give us some time, but she went on me and said that I have no respect for her and her family, and that what I did was irrational, and now she won't speak to me till I clear things up with her family, after ruining their celebratory dinner. Me and my wife, Jessie, had our daughter 2 years ago. Jessie is a smoker. She doesn't smoke a lot, but she consumes 2/3 a day. She wanted to be the one who got pregnant, and I told her that she couldn't smoke at any point in the pregnancy, and only after our baby stopped breastfeeding, she could start consuming again. She agreed. I'm against smoking. I don't smoke, but it doesn't bother me that much other people smoke, and to my delight, Jessie was never a person who smelled like cigarettes despite being a smoker. The reason I'm against it's that my father died of lung cancer, and guess what? He smoked. When our daughter was born, I managed to stay at home for 1 year and 3 months, because it hit the pandemic and home office, so we could both take care of it. Jessie also took advantage of the home office, same company, I'm in a higher position. When our company asked for employees to come back from the home office, we decided that we didn't want to put her in childcare yet, and we decided together that I would come back, and she would quit to stay at home all the time. Currently, we have a fair division of tasks at home. When I get home from work, I take care of our daughter so she can rest, and 2 days a week, part-time, I work at home so as not to overload. I know she stays overwhelmed, but I try to help. Recently, our daughter weaned and Jessie came to talk to me that she wanted to finally start smoking again. I said that I wouldn't pay for them, but I pay for everything. I even proposed to rearrange my schedule in case she wanted to do some freelancer. She's also a designer. But I wouldn't give her the money. Cigarettes are my limit. She was annoyed, saying that we agreed on her being Som and that I would provide financially for the family, including her expenses, and I am going behind our agreed. I never paid / would pay for a cigarette of hers, and she has known this for years. She's still mad at me, saying I'm using being the breadwinner to not let her smoke and forcing her to look for another way to earn money to buy something she wants. I don't know if I'm wrong, but cigarettes are a choice and a bad addiction. I don't feel comfortable paying for it. Given my family history, I always made it very clear that I would never pay for a cigarette. When we made the decision for her to be Som, I told her I wouldn't feel right paying for her cigarette, and she reassured me that it was something I wouldn't have to worry about. She does freelance to make some purchases she wants. There are months when we are tighter and we can't do some shopping, so she does freelancing. It's rare, but it happens, and on those days, our daughter stays with me even if it's at my service. I never limited any of her purchases, ever, if not because of tight money. For more extravagant purchases of hers that I can't afford, she freelances and buys. So I suggested she do one a month that covers her entire cigarette stash, and I would help by staying with our daughter. She is not entirely financially dependent on me. When she wants to buy something that I can't afford with our money, she makes a design request. My brother and I do not get on. When we were younger, he'd go out of his way to make my life a living hell. To my parents' credit, they did tell him off for it when they caught him, but they both worked long hours and didn't have the energy to deal with our arguments. This continued into adulthood. He was salty that he failed his college course the first time around. There was a bad argument in our family a while ago, and it all started because I refused to decorate my brother's living room. I won't go into too much detail, but he wanted a pretty hefty discount. I said no, and he threw a tantrum. Instead of being a grown-up and talking to me, he decided to hook up with my toxic ex-girlfriend and the mother of my child. I can't go into a lot of detail about what she was like, but she was not a nice person. She never really bonded with our son when he was born, and I was left to do everything by myself. She eventually walked out on us and refused to have any contact with our son. She'll post on Facebook now and then about her beautiful baby boy to get sympathy votes, but that's about it. I have been a single dad for almost 3 years now, and I absolutely adore my son, but it hurts to think that one day he might question why his mom didn't want anything to do with him. How am I supposed to explain that to him? Anyway, it bothered me when my brother told me they'd hooked up together. It hurt even more when he started dating her. It had taken me so long to get over what she did to me and my child, and now my own brother was bringing her back into my life. Yesterday we had a family video call. Parents are high risk, and we're not taking any chances. When my brother decided to announce that he and my ex were expecting, I just froze. I didn't know what to do or think. I could feel myself starting to cry a little bit, and it got a bit harder to breathe. Eventually, I decided to just congratulate them and then made up some lie about needing to put my son down for a nap and left. I received a bunch of messages from my brother and his GF telling me that I stole their thunder. After I left, my parents and some other family members started worrying if I was okay, and not really focusing on their news. My uncle told me that I should have just been a man and stuck it out instead of making excuses to get out of it. After all, it was expected that our kids would be raised around each other. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have left the call, but at the same time it would have been worse if I'd stayed and had a full-blown panic attack in front of everyone. Some of the family members are split and have argued that I won't be able to avoid my brother and his family forever, but others believe I was in the right to leave that situation. I don't know what to think. My parents aren't happy, but they don't have the energy to deal with all the hassle my brother would cause. They actually cut him off for a little while when he started dating my ex, but he phoned them constantly and, again, can't go into much detail, but he said he'd do something not so good. They keep him at arm's length, but I have told them not to cut contact because of me. If they want to cut contact on their own accord, then that's fine, but I do not want to be the reason that they have to deal with his tantrums. The rest of the family, for the most part, weren't happy about it but accepted it, or pretended to. When they started getting a bit more serious, my uncle, who told me to be a man, thought it was funny. That's just the kind of person he is. Not for my sake, but for the sake of my son. I don't want to put him through all that. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to, very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, It is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action. Seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated.